Remind council that staff will be pausing every so often to answer any questions. First item is to receive an update on the fiscal year 26 strategic plan for common visioning. Would you please introduce yourself for those watching on board?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Katie Wilkin, Development Services Director, and I am joined by Christian William, our Planning Manager. We are here tonight to provide an update on a strategic plan item, which is identified as council staff alignment on the future vision for development, which is due this fiscal year. And it has been in our strategic plan for a few years, since November 8th, 2023, which as of note is about 3 weeks before I was made interim director. So some context there. There are a few different ways we can look at the common visioning for development, and we are going to go over kind of 3 areas in our presentation tonight. The first is looking at the common visioning from our development review process. But then we're also going to talk about how we come together for visioning in development trends and emerging issues. And finally, some of our community planning and other strategic items where we'll have opportunities to align on the common vision. So the development review process really does start with our general plan, which was ratified by voters on May 21st, 2024, with 76% of the vote voting for our general plan. And as you already know, it had included an extensive public outreach, but it also included many touch points with City Council and gave us an opportunity to talk about the vision between Council and staff. And so just a quick overview, Council appointed the General Plan Committee as well as an outreach and communication plan. And back in April of 2022, there were one-on-one meetings with our consultant and Council and surveys to get your input. And then it culminated in a work session to review the draft in September 2023, and Council adopted it in November 2023 before sending it to the voters for action. As part of the general plan process, the Parks Master Plan and Transportation Master Planning went at the same time. So with the public, there were joint public outreach events, but they did have unique touch points with City Council for input and direction. And so the Parks Master Plan came to you in work session in February 2023. And then after that, the Transportation Master Plan came separately in work session in June. And then Council adopted the Parks Master Plan in November of 2023, and then the Transportation Master Plan in December 2023. So along the same time frame as the general plan, but there were separate discussions where Council was giving staff direction on the vision for these 2 items, which directly informed the general plan and overall vision for development. You might remember we had a project added in that wasn't originally part of the plan, and that was an update to our design guidelines manual. At that time, Council was receiving a lot of input from our development community about the design guidelines, and I do think this project directly contributed to this item being put into the strategic plan item itself, because you were hearing that there was not alignment on things like colors and the design guidance we were given. So Council asked us under your guidance to adjust and add in an update to the design guidelines manual, which we did. And we did bring a draft to you in October 2024, and you adopted it in November 2024. And I hope you would report that you're not hearing the same input from the development community, that there is a misalignment on the direction, and that this new document is doing its job of providing better guidance both to the development community and staff as we implement these development review projects. It's also worth noting we've had several projects around water planning over the last year or 2 as well. Similar to the general plan, you also established a citizen water committee to oversee many of these projects. You had a work session on water service providers in October 2023, a draft of the integrated water master plan in March 2025. The water resource allocation policy came to you in work session in April of 2025, and then you adopted the integrated water master plan in April 2025 and the water resource allocation policy in May 2025. And obviously, there is a direct link between our water policies and the development review. So all of this planning and work session discussion also goes further to inform staff on our direction. It's also worth noting that during this time, we updated the impact fees, which includes an extensive planning and discussion process with the infrastructure improvement plan and development fee report. And that included noticing at council meetings in March 2023. You had a work session to discuss the land use assumption and plan in September 2023, and then you adopted the plan in October 2023. Then you discussed the proposed fees in November 2023, and they were adopted by council in January 2024. More recently, we brought to you the Engineering Design Standards and Policy Manual update. That was presented to you in work session in July 2025, and then council adopted that in September 2025. We are currently working on an update to the international codes, which includes the building code, fire code, and property maintenance code, which is code compliances codes. I have on here February, but it's looking like we're going to bring that to you in March of this year to adopt the updated building code and international code books. And then you also are aware of the zoning ordinance update project. You've already had some one-on-one meetings, and then we had that work session in October 2025. And then we're going to be coming to you again in 2 additional work sessions, one in March and one in May, to just get your guidance on various topics similar to what we did in October. And then we hope to work toward adoption in June of 2026. So to kind of summarize all this detailed information I just went through, the development review process is guided by the general plan, which had extensive input and direction from City Council to staff, as well as the master plans that guide development, and then our codes and ordinances. What's really exciting is that all of these documents, should the IBC get adopted and the zoning ordinance project continue as we project, all of our development-related master plans, ordinances, and codes will be less than 3 years old, which really goes a long way to making sure that council's voice and vision is being implemented by staff. And I don't think this has ever been true in my 20 years with the city of Goodyear that we could say something like this. And I know what your next question is going to be. And yes, we are working on a plan to make sure we keep these documents up to date. We know you're going to hold us to task on that. Some plans, like the general plan, get updated once every 10 years, but other documents we want to make sure are updated annually. So we're working internally to make sure we have the resources to keep these up to date. Next, we're going to talk about common visioning and alignment between staff and council as it relates to development trends and emerging issues, and Christian's going to take this part of the presentation.
Thanks, Katie. So it's been quite some time since council has received a general plan annual report. And in fact, some of you on council may not have ever seen a general plan report. It's been quite some time. So what we will be doing here shortly is providing you with a trends report, which will give you information on how we're doing on our growth journey. So this is, again, something that other cities provide. We haven't found a great example of that, so we're going to create one that's more, with the audience being council. This trends report is going to be structured to feel less like an update on every single goal in the general plan, but rather an easy to read format that tells the council where we are on a growth journey and give topics such as how much inventory for space do we have for available new businesses, what's our residential growth looking like, and a lot of topic areas in between, so that if you're ever stopped in the grocery store and asked a question about Goodyear, you have an easy way to be able to provide residents with some basic information on how we're doing in our growth journey. So you will be the audience of that, and we're excited to bring that report back. What this is going to look like is we want to get back on an annual cycle of providing these updates, and the report that's due out in 2026, we anticipate providing to you in fall, so that you'll have this in time for your council retreat, and it can be another tool that you have for richer policy discussions, budgeting discussions, as you progress through the next fiscal year to prepare for the upcoming years. And with that update, I'll turn it back over to Katie to close us out.
Thank you. Finally, we wanted to touch base of where we are with alignment on the vision as it relates to community planning and strategic projects. So again, All right, I'll say that again for the microphone. So finally, we wanted to give you an update of where we are with an alignment on the vision as it relates to community planning and strategic projects. And so just a reminder that we have many projects already in the strategic plan where we're going to be looking to council to give us guidance on your vision and not just how it relates to our development review projects, but overall the growth of the city. As we already discussed, the zoning ordinance update is already going on, and there's going to be several more touch points where you're going to be able to give us input on that. One item I'll say in here that I didn't list as a bullet is we also have the ballpark, the land adjacent to the ballpark village RFP planning going on right now as well. We have the item of the real estate strategy. We just had an internal meeting on it today where you asked us to give you create a vision for state and federal lands, annexation policy, and an outlook on those types of projects. We have the housing diversity item, which talks about planning for executive housing and other mix of housing types for the community. The quality neighborhoods, which is looking at that multi-housing as well as code compliance and the future of our city from a maintenance standpoint as a whole. And then the long-range amenities master plan. So all these projects are going to have touch points with council where you're going to be able to give us that direction and input and make sure staff and council are aligned on the vision for the community. And that does conclude our update on this item. And so I will just leave you with the question of if there are any additional projects or initiatives you want to make sure that's on staff's radar or any input you have on for us.
Before I turn over the rest of the council, quick, at the beginning, you had steps on all the different projects by dates that the public was involved in. Can we get that in some type of a text form so that it gets shrunk? So when we're out there and people ask how we get input from the public, you did a really good job at the very beginning summarizing all that. So we can go through and we can identify that, each one of those pieces. So that would be very, very helpful. Okay, with that, if you can do that for us, I really would appreciate it. Anything from anybody here? Got questions? Then, do you have one?
So my only question is, would things that are important to the public, would there be an opportunity to put some of that in focus? I think some of the items.
Absolutely.
Good point. Go ahead.
Well, first I want to commend you on all the things that have been done. I mean, not only just you, but the Water Services Department, engineering, everybody. I mean, that is a lot of plans that have been put together, and I'm really thankful. And yes, you're right, I'm not getting any feedback about design guidelines and things like that. And I think it's really significant that you mentioned that 3 weeks later you became interim, because I feel that some of the impetus for that strategic plan item was because there wasn't as good of communication between the department and council. We were getting a lot of complaints from the development community about process and things like that. And you've just taken that on, you and your staff have taken that on. And so in addition to all of the growth that you've been managing, you've had to invest a lot of time and energy in process improvement, in addition to all these different plans. And so I just want to thank you publicly for taking all that on and doing such a good job. Yeah, you've done a lot on process improvement, not hearing nearly the level of feedback. I know the building codes is coming up in the zoning ordinance, and I did hear from a representative from the Home Builders Association of Central Arizona. They've been very pleased with the stakeholder engagement and the ability to put input into that process. And so that's the excellent kind of feedback we certainly like to hear. That's all good things. I really like the idea of the general plan annual report or the trends report. I usually try to go to the ULI Trends Day just to hear the trends, because I think it hits the developer and investor level before it really hits the city sometimes, and it just gives us an idea of what's coming down the pike. And so But as you're looking to report on the commercial land we have available and housing and things like that, is that taking into consideration, I mean, essentially where we have infrastructure as opposed to maybe once you get past Cantabia, all that drops off? And so is that what you'll be reporting on? Because we do say we're 15% built out, but we have a lot of land we can't even access.
Yeah, we'll definitely take that into account, and as we provide it to you, we're happy to always get feedback on how to make it better.
Okay. And I think it's really important for trends as you're keeping up our energy trends, because that seems to be very, in all different kinds of forms, but that is something that's definitely being addressed. I mean, the energy is now just as critical as water at the state level. And so, developers always find a way in just keeping up with energy trends. So that way we're not lagging. But anyway, thank you for all your good work. For, again, engineering, for water, for parks. I mean, everybody who's had to do plans. It's made a big difference.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. And I guess before I hop over to my thing, just piggyback on Councilmember Kano's comment as well about energy. Just make sure that we're open to all forms of energy. For example, I think I mentioned before about geothermal, things like that, outside the box type things that were zoned appropriately to be able to handle and welcome those type of things as well. But yeah, no, I appreciate everything here. Looking forward to the discussions on the zoning, real estate, housing, diversity, quality neighborhoods, long-range amendments, and just for the public too, that when people say we might have a strategic plan, we do have a strategic plan. We're working in it. We have a common vision here in the city of Goodyear that we're working towards. So I just want to point that out as well. And was this 2010? Was that when I was on the general plan committee back? I don't know if I was back then or not.
It was
Because I think you were
yeah.
because you weren't even I think you were almost acting back then, or you were a planner.
I was the planning manager. I was
You
in
were.
Christian's role.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I was a planner when the general plan
Yeah,
started, and then
yeah,
I
'cause
became
you were
planning
our-
manager.
You were taking care of
Yeah, so that
taking
was
care of us.
one ago. Yes.
Yeah. So just the timeline. Just I'm nostalgic, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
But no, I appreciate all of it. Keeping those things updated and having a frequency on those on all our standards is important. So we're up to date on everything, and then we don't lag behind anything as well, and have to go back and do a major rehaul. So thank you for all that.
Anything over here? We good? Again, I appreciate all the effort, and like Laura was mentioned, I'm not hearing a whole lot out there. Their biggest challenge, though, is unfortunately there's a lot of bad actors out there that aren't doing what we're doing, and sometimes we get lumped in. I had a meeting with a group of them the other day, and I asked them to please, out there among the public, when they're among their other developers, please let them know that we're working to get the feedback and to make changes with our system that makes it easy for you to operate through the stuff. But I know you got your hands full down at the legislature only because there are some bad actors. And unfortunately, when they write legislation, it kind of puts everybody in the same boat. So keep plugging away at that. But I appreciate all that you're doing there, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, next item. Last item is receiving an update on the 2027-2030 Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnership Program. If you would, please, when you come up here to the microphone, go ahead and introduce yourself for the public.
Awesome. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me here today. I am going to share with you where we are in our planning process for a community development block grant funding, which will also consider or provide a framework for the HUD home dollars when we start receiving those. You approved that resolution at the last meeting. So today, our focus is going to be on providing information about the consolidated planning process and then making some recommendations for your consideration, including in the plan. So as a reminder, the consolidated plan provides the framework for how the city is going to use its HUD community planning and development funds. That includes the Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, which we've been getting for 5 years now, and the home investment dollars that we hope to begin to receive in fiscal year '28. The consolidated plan can be for as few as 3 years and as many as 5. Last time, it was a 5-year plan. When we are part of the home consortium, we need to align our planning with the county consortium. So this 4-year plan is going to get us on the same schedule as them, and then we'll be doing 3-year consolidated planning after that. After the big schedule gets made, we do annual action plans for each year's entitlement and say specifically how are we going to spend that year's grant money from the federal government. And so what we're talking about today is just our fiscal year '27 annual action plan, which is the budget that just passed and fortunately was fully funded at the federal level. So there's also a required process that we need to go through to plan for how these monies are going to be spent. It starts with outreach, and we advertise that we are having public meetings. We go to stakeholders. We went to the Faith and Community Roundtable and provided a presentation to them on what the constraints are around the grant program and what we're thinking about using our investment for. We also use data to inform where the greatest needs are, and then we push all of that together to come up with a plan for how we're going to spend the money. So, based on the information that we have coming together for Phase 3 of the Community and Neighborhood Services Master Plan, along with the data that we need to provide to HUD. It's their own data, but we still have to tell them just specific to our community and our plan. In that consolidated planning process, we are suggesting changing up the high priorities a little bit from what they were in the 5-year plan, but we still want to keep all of the options on the table just in case something great presents itself. So last time, attainable and sustainable housing was a lower priority, but this time we're recommending moving that to a high priority and then continuing to leave economic development as a lower priority. Also continuing to do community facilities and improvements projects like we've been doing, and public services have been up there. And then certainly we need the resources for public administration or program administration. So now that you understand that those are the recommended priorities, we have to decide what activity do we want to spend our money on in fiscal year '27 that fits in one or more of those categories. And so we don't know our exact location from HUD yet because they just figured out the budget on February 4th. So they now have to figure out how many communities the money gets divided up against, and we'll get an allocation later. For planning purposes, because that's kind of a fixed deadline, we're continuing to use the trending number that we've gotten in the past, which is about $415,000. I want to remind you that the maximum we can take for program administration is 20% of the total allocation, so we'll continue to do that. And that leaves about $330,000 for other activities. If we want to do public services, which is like direct services like landlord-tenant counseling or child care services, then that would be capped at 15% of whatever our total allocation is. And then it would be taken from what remains, and that balance would be left for capital investment. So now that you understand that, some of the ideas that came up at the public meetings were varied. We've been getting better and better suggestions as we continue to educate the public about what's allowable. And there are two in particular that stood out as feasible and eligible and ready. And that is the tenant landlord public service benefit, and then reviving our owner occupied home rehab program that had been piloted with the COVID response package. So my recommendation is to keep the 20% for program admin, and then to allow for up to 15% of our total allocation for Giovanni Cares. A little bit about them, and I apologize. I meant to attach this to the car, and I didn't. But if you want to take one and pass one. Giovanni Cares is a Goodyear-based nonprofit. Giovanni is both the executive director is both a resident of Goodyear, and this business has a physical location in Goodyear over by Chewy and FedEx and Amazon. They provide housing stability and eviction prevention services throughout the West Valley. They are an Arizona Supreme Court approved certified community legal advocate organization, and their work focuses on preventing eviction-related displacements through early legal advocacy, education, mediation, and court support. They are registered in SAM.gov and eligible to receive federal funding. Eviction filings continue to rise in the county and across the U.S., and I like to quote Giovanni when I talk about this now. What she experiences is that it's not that people don't have the money, it's that they don't have the time. And they need the time to be able to get the money together. And a lot of times what we wind up seeing, or she winds up seeing, is improper lockouts, failure to credit payments, and then people are locked out, like the case I observed them working in court, even though they paid their landlord and gave them the next month's rent. And now they have zero money to go someplace else, even in the interim, and they can't get into their property to get access to their medications and their belongings. It's quite eye-opening to observe. Giovanni Cares served 1,540 residents last year. Nearly 600 of them were Goodyear residents. And this investment will allow them to increase that impact for our residents. CDBG funds will strictly be used for eviction prevention public services. They won't be used for rental assistance, child care services when people are in court, or direct financial assistance, although Giovanni Cares does provide those services to their clients. These funds will not be applied towards those services. Our residents will still be able to access them. Their funding request is $62,200, and it covers the staffing needed and direct program support costs to help that. For them to be able to expand eviction prevention services under their certified community legal advocate program as a subrecipient. And with that, I would ask if you have any questions or concerns, because pending your input tonight, I will put these two investments in our three investments in our consolidated plan, and it will be available for public comment from April 1st through April 30th. We will be in council chambers for a public hearing on April 27th. For additional opportunity for the public to comment verbally, and then any of those comments will be incorporated into the final draft, which will come before you on May 11th for you to authorize, pending our CDBG allocation. We'll submit the final plan to HUD to be approved and available after July 1. Any comments, questions, feedback?
Well, the only thing I want to add, and I'll turn it over to everybody else over here, is my understanding is evictions are up considerably. And I guess that's unfortunate because of the nature of what's going on out there right now. But, I personally, think we can do to help those individuals. And those particular needs, I think is a plus. With that, anything on this side? Yeah, go ahead, Vic.
I guess I'd like to know why evictions are up. Do we know?
I do not know. Giovanni is here. I don't know if it'd be appropriate for her to.
No, I would just, I would just think, number one, if you would come up and answer that, I would imagine economic conditions on some is making it very difficult for them to meet. Let her expand on that,
Thank you.
on that definition, but,
Thank you.
I suspect that's what's happening out there, but go ahead.
All right, good evening. My name is Giovanni Sherrod-Leggett. I am the founder and executive director of Giovanni Cares in Goodyear. So to answer your question, evictions, a lot of them are up because we have noticed through our cases, the 5-day notices are incorrect. So landlords are completing the 5-day notices wrong, but the tenants are not educated on how the 5-day notices should be written. So when they go to court, the judges see a lot of cases. We have found even the judges making mistakes. They see over 200 cases sometimes in one day. So also, we have noticed that the landlords have been receiving payments and not completing the judgments. Whenever someone receives a late payment, they get a 5-day notice, right? After the 5-day notice, if they do not pay, the landlord could take them to court. Once they go to court, just so you know, they have only a few days to make that payment in full. If the tenant pays it, the landlord is obligated to satisfy the judgment. Majority of the landlords do not. They keep the money and the tenants do not know how to move along in the court system. So that closes the case and now they're evicted and it's hard for them to get other places. We stop that. We provide that time that they don't have to access the court and the knowledge and educate them at the same time.
Thank you. Did she answer your question?
Yeah, I guess my next question would be, can we do something about that or not?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's anything we can do specifically about that. That's why we hire her.
This helps.
Thank you, yes.
So,
Fund Giovanni.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
any other questions here? Go ahead.
Well, I did have a conversation with Christina today, so some of this is a little bit of a repeat. Typically, we do a facility project, and so is this the first time we've done a public service?
It's not the first time we've done a public service because the YMCA
Oh, okay.
includes a public service.
Okay.
But I will say, when we first took on CDBG, I was nervous about public service because it is, we definitely want to make sure the organizations we invest in with public services have the capacity to administer federal funds because I have to monitor them and make sure they're doing it right.
Okay.
And I have confidence in this
Okay,
organization.
so you've verified, you have confidence that
Yeah.
they have the capacity to do that. I know that when we do community funding, we ask for some type of reporting, but I would imagine the reporting that is required for CDBG is going to be much more extensive.
Very much so. It's reimbursable. So unlike our community funding, it's not a lump sum upfront payment that we can't, that we enter into a formal contract with them as a subrecipient that they'll comply with the federal regulations and that they will have to repay the funds if we have to repay the funds. So none of us want to have to repay the funds. And then they'll have to submit information, proof that of hours worked. They'll have to track time and effort for the salaries before we can pay on them. And then, a proof of payment for any of the supplies and stuff like that before they get reimbursed.
Okay. And is there a process that you have to ensure that our money will only go for Goodyear residents?
So Giovanni Cares has the ability to track all of their clientele by the address. She'd be better positioned to explain specifically how they do that. But yes, they have to maintain those records and they'll have to be able to prove that the funds were allocable to this award.
Okay. And then my next questions are about process. I understand for the rehab, you are going to go out to bid for that. Would you talk about that?
Sure. So in the world of grants, there's a difference between a subrecipient and a contractor or subcontractor, and that makes a difference in what regulations flow down to them. There is sometimes an element of a little subjectivity or gray area between which is which. In this case, Giovanni's Cares would be a subrecipient because they have control over how the program is administered versus the owner-occupied home rehab will be doing the intake and eligibility clearance before passing that off for someone to manage a particular component service that they provide, contract management service of the grant with sub-vendors.
Okay, so with the rehab, you're going to go out to bid, but for the public service portion, you've designated Giovanni Cares as the best to provide, and that is consistent with HUD guidelines, and it's all on the up and up.
Yes, we don't need to procure for a subrecipient. We do need to procure for a contractor.
Okay. And then what about, so we're going to do this, and I don't know how long these funds go for, but this will have a start and an end date at some point, right? Or when the money runs out. Is there any discussion or any plans about how to keep a rehab or eviction prevention or tenant education program going? I know Goodyear, we're really good at outsourcing those types of needs, which I think is really important, but this is only for a period, and so what's the plan for ongoing service?
So in terms of the tenant advocacy, this is not a multi-year ask. We will enter into a 1-year subrecipient agreement with her with the opportunity to extend if there are still funds on the table that can be spent, or we can make the decision not to extend that agreement if we have a better use for it or another necessary use for it at the conclusion of the grant, the initial contract period. Because CDBG funds are time restricted, but they can spread multiple years. This is not a multi-year ask, though. So she is not asking for 2 years or 3 years of funding. She's only asking for 1 year of funding to increase the capacity, which will allow her to increase the capacity of her organization and find additional funding and resources elsewhere as she builds that capacity. For the owner-occupied rehab program, that's more of a, like you said, a city program that we can use these funds for. My recommendation would be for, particularly as the person responsible for a citywide grant strategy, would be for neighborhood services and Parks and Rec to be looking for additional funding opportunities so that we don't feel chained to having to use CDBG for this program all the time. And it would also open the door to flexibility in some situations where it may be cumbersome to use the HUD regulations to implement the rehab program.
So you're confident that there's rehab grants out
I am
there?
absolutely confident, and I've made some recommendations for the department to consider.
Okay, good. Do we have a connection with Giovanni Cares? I know that she or a representative comes to the Goodyear Faith and Community Roundtable, but how are Goodyear residents accessing services at this point?
Oh, great question. So My understanding from Giovanni is that the bulk of her referrals, or many of her referrals coming from Goodyear, come from Goodyear Cares. Candy Hernandez, our navigator.
Okay. All right. Thank you for answering all that. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
The court makes referrals too, by the way.
Okay, you know that Laura and I both sit on the community funding.
Mhm.
Okay, so what you're asking for, just so I'm totally aware, is the $62,000 now. And then do they plan on putting anything in for community funding at all?
No, not this year,
Not this year.
because they feel like this
With
is
doing this,
be
this would be
generous.
fine?
Right.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Anything else? No? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think, Councilwoman Keno asked a lot of good questions, so I had a lot of the same ones, but yeah, so, no, I think this is good, a good use of it and a good idea to kind of do opportunities. So, but I wanted to also, I guess I'm used to more of the more tangible things like the piping and historic Goodyear and sidewalks and parks and things like that. So, I just want to also keep those in mind. I know there's a lot of dollars fighting for their priorities, but I think this is a good idea to try at least. And then I also want to look at all the other ideas too. so.
Absolutely. And they're all
I know, there are
available for
prioritized. I
discussion.
know.
Yeah, next year too.
Yeah, I mean, I saw your little bubble chart there, so thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Great presentation. The one thing is I know she's of great help when the landlords are doing things they shouldn't be doing and they're not recording the payments and maybe it's a question for the attorney itself. Is there anything that we can do just to highlight the education of some of the rights of tenants? You know what I mean? That are being evicted. That's not saying that those services that she's doing is not needed, because if the landlord does not do what they're supposed to, and they've already been served, and end up in court where she can help them. But there's something to, give some ammunition to the tenants so they know when things are going south, they do a little research and contact the individuals.
It's a little bit beyond our jurisdiction, but we can see if there's some resources out there that maybe we can put out online or something.
Online or
Yeah,
something,
we can
okay.
take a look at that.
Because I think that would be helpful, also help her with her clients, and they would know if something's south, they would contact, and then want somebody to help them get through the court system. Because unfortunately, I think there's a lot of things out there where people take advantage, unfortunately, of people. And it seems to be, commonplace out there, unfortunately. And it would be nice if we could get at least some ammunition in some of their hands so they know what rights they have. So, okay. All right, with that, that's great. Thank you for your presentation. I don't see anything else. So with that, next meeting is February 17th. No further business. This one's done.